sharpen your pencils because you're all going to be learning a lot.
I was the third woman hired as an attorney by the oldest law firm in the country.
When you're uncomfortable, that's where you have to hit the gas even harder.
But it was a game changer.
The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
One of the things that Answering Legal allows me to do is quickly get back to new clients that are calling, and that's absolutely critical because when you're dealing with a criminal case, time is of the essence. I've been hired because I was the only lawyer who called the person back. Calling means you care. When you call a client back quickly, it means you care. Answering Legal has really allowed me to excel and have personal time with my family and a great quality of life.
Welcome to another episode of The Earley Show, sponsored by our friends over at Answering Legal. I'm your host, Chris Earley, and as always, we bring to you the very best in the legal profession. And today we have a very special guest. We have Cynthia Sharp, who is my first ever business coach, who has been a total game changer in my career. So I asked her to come on because of how much she has helped me in my career. And she's just a very knowledgeable, savvy lawyer. She's been through a few rodeos, and that's what I love is I've grown so much with her. So a lot of wisdom she's got, and so I'm really excited. She has a lot of energy, which I do too. So she and I really sort of gel well, and I love that about her. So as always, we're gonna have plenty of writer downers. Make sure you sharpen your pencils, right? Because we're all gonna be learning a lot from Cindy today. So Cindy, welcome to the Earley Show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate, I always appreciate an opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Likewise. I appreciate that. It means a lot. So, you and I've been coaching with you for, I want to say 3.5 years.
Just about.
So I've come to know you very well. You've come to know me very well. For those who haven't met you or come across your name before, could you tell us a little bit about let's go back to the start, right? Your upbringing, how it's impacted you. Take us through eventually law school, sort of, your general trajectory from a young age to this point in your career.
All right, great. I'll get going. And if you want any more detail about anything or less, just let me know. I'm from the Midwest originally. I was actually born in Louisiana, but grew up in both Ohio and Indiana. And ultimately, I left the Midwest when I was to go to law school. But just a little bit about my upbringing is I had a very modest upbringing. My dad was the first generation of college. I was only the second person out of our entire extended family who went to college. Unfortunately, family life was somewhat dysfunctional because my dad was a functioning alcoholic, and my mom had some of her own issues as well. And I think what that did, I was always encouraged to do my best and to work hard. I think what happened is that to escape from the chaos, I ended up working really hard and frankly neglected my social life for many, many years. And so I was an excellent student in high school. I just last year, as I've mentioned to you, I was given an award from my high school. I graduated 50 years ago, if you can believe it. And I was inducted into their Hall of Fame. And in the interview, I was asked, what is the thing that you would do different in high school? And what I told them was study less and play around a little bit more. So I went to, my dad died young. There was no money for college, but I knew I was going to college because my parents brainwashed me. So I went to a small school, not so small, state school in Indiana, Ball State University. I was a philosophy major of all things, but I got my start real practical basis. But I worked full time. So I worked through college to support myself. Fortunately, I had a full tuition scholarship. But then I knew that staying in a small town in the Midwest wasn't going to be enough for me. So I determined I'm going to go to the East, either the East Coast or the West Coast. I saw more opportunities on the East Coast because I knew I could move to DC, work for the federal government, go to law school at night, which is what I did Georgetown law at night. My jobs, again, it was full time. I had jobs all the way from being in a pilot project on a computers. They had these new things called computers. I was on a pilot project with the U.S. House of Representatives in bringing debate, summary of proceedings and debate right to the representatives' offices. I then got a job. I for some reason fell in love with antitrust law. So I got a job with the Federal Trade Commission for a year doing antitrust. Decided that there were just too many documents and I didn't want a career of looking for smoking guns. And I had at that point fallen in love with tax law. I went to work then for U.S. Senate Finance Committee when Robert Dole was chair and finished my studies at Georgetown, went to NYU, LLM in tax. Then, Chris, I said, well, I'm going to go to a big law. I want to make as much money as I can right away. So I started out in big law and lasted 1 year with the first firm. It was the oldest law firm in the country in Philadelphia. Second firm, I again lasted 1 year. And I said, I don't like this environment. So I decided to start my own law firm. And that was in 1984. So I started a firm, and that was it. From the firm went through a number of permutations. I had different partners, would be on my own. I found that I liked being the person in charge, where I'm most effective. Ultimately, though, after I guess about 25 years of being an attorney, I knew that I wasn't going to finish out a career in law. And I decided that, look, once I've got the 25 years in, it's legitimate to switch to something else. So I found a buyer for my law firm, sold the firm. I stayed 3 years after finding the buyer to do the handoff. And then ultimately, I took a year where I was leading masterminds. I had been through the 3 years transition. I had been doing a lot of studying with coaches. I've always been, the only reason I can hold myself out there as a coach is that I believe in it so strongly, because without the coaching programs and the individual coaches that I have, I wouldn't have had the business wherewithal or even the confidence to move into selling a law firm, launching a business, the Sharper Lawyer, which I did after a year after my transition period. And in the Sharper Lawyer, what I do is my tagline is I help attorneys generate more revenue for their law firm. I do that. So that's really been close to 14 years. I've had the Sharper lawyer. I coach people all the way from solo practices all the way to attorneys who are in large law firms, who are really, I call it my Path to Partnership program. And then and then I also speak professionally. I give professional CLE presentations on behalf of bar associations and law firms, do a little bit of keynoting. Then during the pandemic, it was just the beginning. I had a presentation I was giving we had all gone online. It was that first month, it was March of 2020, March 18th, 2020. And I met a person during the presentation who I hit it off with. We followed up, which, as you know, that's one of my key points that I emphasize to people for great success is follow up, follow up, follow up. And we had a conversation and decided to start an online business together, which we still run, the Legal Burnout Solution, where it's mostly continuing legal education, blending it in the mental health arena with an emphasis on mindfulness. And then here we sit today being interviewed by the preeminent Mr. Chris Earley. And that's the story of my life.
Well, that's so much to unpack there. That's such an interesting career arc. Couple questions for you is I see this a lot in the profession, and that's, I think, what we dive with so well, you and I, that we're on the same wavelength, is we came from a upbringing of dysfunction and found a space through hard work, like found an escape through hard work. I know there's lawyers listening to this that resonates with them, because lawyers are hard charging, driven people, but we're all human beings. And a lot of us can relate to my story, to your story, right? Because we're all flawed. I mean, we all have stuff, we all have issues. I mean, we're all messed up on some level, but it's how we deal with this stuff, you know, and you and I talk about that, and that's how we just really, connect well, because I think the coaching relationship is the connection is important. You know, I talked to a few others before I found you, and I found great, synergy with you. And I think this stems from a commonality from upbringing, and, we're both doers, like a lot of lawyers in this call, we're doers, we get stuff done. I want to ask you a question, kind of a little bit different. Now, when you got your bar card, I don't believe there were as many women in law school as there are today. How have you seen the profession evolve as it relates to women in the profession? Because the way it looks today, I assume wasn't the way it looked like when you got your bar card. Could you talk to that, what you've seen happening since then in the profession?
Oh, I can. I was the third woman hired as an attorney by the oldest law firm in the country, and Roland Henderson. And they were a very conservative firm. I really, myself, I didn't think that much about being a woman. I just said, hey, I'm a person, I'm going to get ahead. And it wasn't something that I thought about until I actually started practicing law. So to give you an idea about the experience back then, it was my first week of practicing law, and our office in one of the big buildings on Broad Street in Center City, Philadelphia, the partners in my department said, we're going to take you to lunch at the Union League Club. And I thought, oh man, I have made it now. So we walked down the street, because it was just, a half block away. And I started to walk up the steps of the front to go to the front door. And they said, whoa, you can't go in the front door. you have to go in the side entrance since you're a woman.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And they said, and in fact, you don't have access to the club except for the pink room, which is where we will be having lunch, but we're going to be in there with you. And so that shows how, that's explicit. That's about as explicit as you can get. So I said, so I guess I'm not going to be part of I'm not going to be able to break into that old boys club.
Mm.
But now, of course, that would be illegal. We get in everywhere. The opportunities back then, I was a woman lawyer. Yeah. And now I think that there is still some of that, but because back then I know I had people that didn't come to me because they didn't want a woman. But now I know myself, I tend to like to patronize women. And so we have a lot of that at this point. That being said, Chris, I gave a presentation this had to be about 6 years ago. And it was a national conference given by ALM in DC. And the whole day it was called BIO, by invitation only. So there were 125 female attorneys. And in order to be invited, you had to either be a senior partner in a law firm or part of the C-suite. So my program was called Claim Your Place at the Financial Table. Well, in the speech, I was talking about what it used to be like back in the day and about men, frankly, making passes at you, overtly, making overt sexist remarks. And the hands started going up. And they told me that hasn't changed. It's maybe there's not as much of it. But what the women reported to me, a partner in the firm, she said the senior partner said, we're having a weekend retreat for the department in my vacation home. She said, okay. She drove up there and she was the only person invited. So there's still a lot of sexism, a lot of inappropriate behavior toward women, but at least we're getting hired now. Although what I'm told for people who work, look in the entrepreneurial space, I've always liked to think that you could set your own income, but with being hired by firms, I don't know that law firms would have the guts to discriminate, but my understanding is that women just are not making as much money as men. So that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Well, I asked you because you have such a wealth of experience and knowledge and seeing so much change in this profession, but obviously there's a lot more needs to be done, right, on many levels there. But I appreciate you sharing because I think it's eye-opening, for maybe some of the younger lawyers. It just that's something that educates all of us to your firsthand experience, right? Real kind of, you just took us into what it was like, and I just can't imagine that. I grew up, me and my mom. I can't imagine handling myself that way with anyone, but it's a sad, no question, much progress needs to be made on that front. You've seen progress, but not nearly enough. So hopefully it doesn't take much longer for decency to pervade everyone.
It's still, it's a process. I'm happy it's come so far. I mean, look, I was called in the courtroom. My adversary called me honey. Right. And came and put his arm around me in front of the judge, and not in a good way. And so I think that at least with the Me Too movement, a lot of that behavior is discouraged. And here's what I also have to say is that at least women are allowed to be pregnant in public. At my firm, but my first firm, they had Mommy Row. So any female attorney who got pregnant was put in one of the back offices. Wow. And, so at least those opportunities, at least there's opportunities available.
Oh, well, I appreciate you taking us on that path, right, and explaining your perspective. So, 1984, you hung a shingle. I mean, did you even have a computer? I mean, I just think starting a law firm today, there's always challenges, but technology, you're a big, and we can get into this, you're a big chat GPT. You're zealously, utilizing it. You're an early adopter of it. I encourage all the lawyers on this call to use it. I just spoke yesterday to the the Vermont Bar Association. We had 2 sessions over 2 days. And I said, you need to leverage chat GPT. But anyway, we get into that. Well, before chat GPT, it was, 1984, you put your flag there. I said, I'm hanging a shingle. What were your challenges? What was it like? Because a lot of lawyers in this call have started practice or thinking about starting a practice. What was it like starting a practice in 1984?
Well, computers, that was called a word processor. So it was dedicated word processor. That's all that we had. There were probably fax machines at that point, but people weren't really using them yet. Wow. So everything was by snail mail. I think that the biggest challenge in starting the firm, first of all, access to information. In order to do research, I either had to go physically get in the car and drive to a law school library, or go to one of the big firms. They allowed they allowed solos to come and use their library, which I thought was pretty friendly. It was frustrating to get, fortunately we did have word processing at that point. Because just imagine that several years before that, we were using, not when I practiced law, but just a few years before, it would be using whiteout and Flexitape, whatever it was, some type of tape that you put on. And so everything was slower, but then everything was slower. Because you put then the technological element, which I love. But back then, if an adversary calls you and said, I didn't get the letter yet, or the client, I didn't get the letter yet that you said that you were going to send, you could say, oh, it went out in today's mail. And then you're like, hey, hurry, get that letter written. And, then you'd have it typed and send it out.
Yeah.
Well, then the fax machine came along and the person would say, oh, here's my fax number. Why don't you fax that over to me right now? Yeah. So you had then this sense of urgency that came about. And then forget now. I mean, there's probably 16 emails that you've received since we've been on, of people wanting documents from you that they expect it now.
Yes.
So the bad news was things were slower, but then of course that was the good news.
Yeah, right.
But then here was the challenge: is getting clients. How do you build a practice? Mm-hmm. Because at that point, we didn't have the internet. There was, I guess the military was inventing it, but we didn't have anything to put your message out. So what I did, well, basically I starved for a year. I'll never forget, Chris, getting this call. This had to be about 83. So getting this call from a bill collector. And I remember I was having a party. It was at my house. And they said, "This is the last call." And I said, "Well, good. I'm sick of getting these calls." So it was a hungry first year. Because I didn't really know how to go out and get clients. But then I started, I'll tell you how it started. Is I had a job when I left the big law. After 2 years, I said, I just can't stand this anymore. And I will tell you, here was one of the things that drove me away from big law is I saw the lack of opportunity, except for those who are at the very top.
Right.
Because I knew what I was making, and frankly, it was pretty decent money. And then I found out what a partner who was my supervising partner, his office was right next door to mine, who had been in practice for 10 years, a partner for 4 years, and he wasn't making that much more than I was, not an appreciable amount. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do this crap for another 8 years to make that. So I got a job working at a paralegal school. I was their executive director. I taught as well, head of their paralegal, and then they had other I was corporate counsel. And I decided, the guy I was working for said, "You can start your own law firm. You can go ahead and pick up clients." Well, I started picking up clients from the students because they or their parents, they liked me. So I said, aha, if I'm a speaker, I can get clients.
Right.
Then there was a student who came to me who worked for a bankruptcy outfit, but it wasn't attorneys. It was, I don't know, just lay people who were basically practicing law. And they had an ad, and they wanted me to be the attorney who signed the paperwork. Well, I wouldn't do that because I'm not a micromanager, but it's got to be under my system or I'm not going to sign. But I took a look at the ad and I said, I could do that. So I designed an ad in bankruptcy. I had never done a bankruptcy case in my life. Started advertising, and my partner and I, within a few years, we had the second largest consumer bankruptcy practice in the state.
I love it.
Oh, it was great. We had so many cases that we had our own time. So they'd say, "Okay, Sharp, you be there at 9:30. And I mean, the trustee then would bring in a stack of files like that. Well, I then left that firm and decided to start an estate planning firm because I'm like, Cindy, you are wasting your LLM in tax. But I said, I'm going to use the same ideas to get estate planning clients as I do with bankruptcy. And also, one of the things, I mean, in the bankruptcy practice, we had a big practice, and it wasn't us doing all that work. We had associates, we had paralegals, receptionists, and the like. So I replicated it when I started the estate planning firm. About 5 minutes after I started that firm, I'll never forget this day. I was at the beach, and I'm reading the New Jersey Law Journal, and it said, "Would you like to build your estate planning practice quickly?" I said, "I would." So I called the number right then and there. I'm compulsive. You know it. I know it. And they said, leave your address. Oh, I got on Monday, when I got to the office, there was a Federal Express package waiting for me, called Shock and Awe, of course.
Yes.
And they said, come out to Las Vegas for 1 week to our training, money back guarantee. All right. So this was it was about 92, 93. Well, this was like $10,000 plus my lodging, my flight, food, the whole bit. But I'm like, you know what? If they say I'm going to make all this money, then I'm going for it. And I did, and I didn't ask for a refund. Because what they did is they taught me in the estate planning arena. It was a law firm in a box, basically.
Yeah.
It was, here's your advertising. This is how you go out and negotiate. I was doing newspaper advertising because we still did not have internet advertising at that
For a
point.
while.
In the 90s. We didn't have email.
Yep.
So what I did is I combined then all my skills of building infrastructure, and then they told us about an efficiency called software. And so it was now, of course, that is everybody's got software. But at that point, we could build our estate planning documents and not have to type them every single time over and over again. So what I did is I built a successful estate planning practice by going out. I put ads in the paper, come and hear me speak. I was it was 1 week a month was speaking month or speaking week. And then the other 3 weeks was bring in the client week. We would sign up right then and there at these presentations. I would do 6 speeches in 3 days because we had down our efficiencies of scale in putting we knew in the newspapers where to put the ads to attract from different arenas. But then we had it down, Chris, to how many buying units do I need to sign up in order for this to be a success? What's got to be my close rate? So at that point, then I was at a high level working on key performance indicators to measure my success, because what gets measured gets managed. So then through the years, I would identify an area, then a sister area, elder law. And by then the estate planning organization that I had belonged to, they said, you'll never make any money in elder law. And I thought, I think maybe it's time for me to leave these folks because I've kind of got their stuff down. But I used the same processes, advertising. But in the elder law, what was a little different is I was doing direct retail advertising in the newspaper. It was, here was an ad that I used, and I designed it, that grew my practice 76% in 1 year. Gross revenue was, are you concerned about the high cost of nursing home care? And put a big ad in the paper, and the phone rang off the hook. Ultimately, I decided that I've had enough. My financial planning was in place. So when I was 52, I said, well, it's time to look for a buyer for the firm, because I knew that it would take some time to get it. And again, people, the legal field, there's so many naysayers. And first of all, people were saying when I was out looking for my buyer, you can't sell a law firm. That's unethical. And of course, me, made perhaps in a little snarky tone, oh, you might want to take a look at Model Rule of Professional Conduct 1.17. So lawyers tend to be behind the times, business-wise.
Massively.
So I ultimately then sold the firm to, I grew my own buyer. It's an attorney who had practiced as an associate with me, left. And then he found out my firm was for sale and he wanted to come back. And so I stayed there. I brought him back in. We had our airtight contract. And then I stayed for 3 years doing the handoff and started the Sharper Lawyer. And here I am.
We both have very advantageous last names for marketing, Sharp, Earley. So it's important to use everything you have, right? I think that's important. So we've talked a lot about, so the theme of our discussion, I feel like, has been change, right, through the years. But yet certain things don't change. And so if I'm hearing your story accurately, right, as we sort of unpack it from a 30,000-foot view, there's timeless, evergreen things at play here. Taking risks, right? That doesn't go out of style. That's not a new concept. But you were taking risks in the 80s. I hear a contrarian, which is not hard to do in the law because everyone's monkey see, monkey do. It's not easy. It's not hard to stand out. So in the 80s, in the 90s, you were standing out and people are saying, Sharp, what are you, nuts? And you're saying, okay, I'm going to do my thing. And that, I think that's really important for lawyers because we're always imitating each other, very straight-laced, boring profession when it's just not the way it needs to be or should be, frankly. And you're also a lifelong learner, right? No matter what stage of your career, it sounds like you've been learning, a lifelong learner. And then that ended up in you becoming a coach yourself. But I encourage the lawyers on this call, right? Because many, if not all, are entrepreneurs. You have to take risks. You have to be a contrarian. You have to be a lifelong learner. And together with that lifelong learner concept is the idea of investing sometimes lots of money in your professional development. You mentioned 10,000 in the early 90s. That's probably 30. I don't know. I'm not an economist. It's probably 30 grand today. So, and that was a boatload of money then. It's a boatload of money today. But you had the guts to spend that, and knowing there was no guarantee there. Lawyers need to spend money. I'm spending sums of money on my professional development. And 5 years ago, I would have thought I would told you I was, it would be crazy to do that. Now it's like, how can I spend more on my development? So lawyers on this call need to spend money if they're serious about leveling up, about growing. Now that takes us to around winter of 2021. I'd never had a coach, but I had been I think I was in a mastermind. Yeah, it was in a mastermind at that point. So I started Googling. It was a cold, snowy day in Boston. I started Googling coaches for lawyers, and I found you. And I didn't know you from Adam. I had no idea who you were. I didn't know who a good coach was, but I recall talking to a couple others before that, or maybe at that time. And then, we've talked once a week, ever since. And you're not the right coach for everybody, right? And just like I'm not the right lawyer for everybody. We all have to work with people who we jive with. But I'm blessed to say that it's been a really good relationship because that led me, now I have 3 coaches. That led to a lot of development, right? And doors opened up. But I just want to give the audience an example of what some of our discussions. When we first started, I wasn't doing any public presentations. That wasn't on my radar. Things evolved to such a degree. You and I spent an entire hour coaching session on the minutia of a presentation I was about to do. The minutia about the font of the bio that you hand the presenter to read before you get on, the minutia of body language, the minutia of eye contact, right? Really geeking out on this stuff. So a coach can really, I just want to press on the audience, a coach literally levels you up, right? Athletes, there's reasons why they have a bevy of coaches. So, if you're not already utilizing a coach, I can tell you, Cindy can tell you, this stuff works, but you need to find the right one. All right. So you've coached a lot of lawyers. I'd love to hear, from your perspective as a coach, what are some things that get in lawyers' ways, more times than not, from having the career that they should have, that they want to have?
I think that having an attitude that, oh, success is for that other guy. Okay, success, that's not me. It's that it's other people that have that secret sauce. Not, and Chris, in making the investment that both you and I have made in our businesses, a lot of that is having confidence in yourself.
100%.
And so, because 100%. I know if I'm involved in something, it's going to work. And I don't mean to be cocky about it, but it's because, and here's the qualities then that I could say that for attorneys, what they need to be successful in whatever business is first of all, learning. So as an example, when I decided I wanted to be an attorney business coach and a professional speaker, I didn't just say, okay, here I am, everybody. I took lots of training. I went to school to be a coach. I took the Chris. I went to speaking school. Chris, I went to 2 different camps, speaking camps, each 5 days in a row, because I knew that in order I want to be the best I can be, because otherwise I'm not going to reach my full potential.
Yep.
And so that's investing in myself. Then you've got a willingness to look long term, and knowing that, yes, it's our little actions that control our long-term results. All too often, people will start with the results. So as an example, as you know, and you've already talked about, is that I believe one great way to bring in clients is it's all about branding. It's about who are you to the marketplace, is to get out there and speak, to people that you know, like, and trust. So because then they will want to hire you. Well, here's the objections that I get is, Chris Earley's already speaking in that field, or fill in the blank. Someone else is already doing that. I don't care, because they don't have my perspective. They don't have your perspective. Yep. And in speaking, people are looking for connection. Another mistake that I hear, well, I gave a CLE and I never got any business out of it. And then when I talk to the person, it's no wonder they never got any business out of it, because they showed up right on time. They left afterwards, right after the speech, and didn't take time to connect with the audience. They didn't have a follow-up mechanism. So, and that is one of the key points, as I have promised. I started out with follow-up, is that if you're not following up with connections, with clients, with your own work, that's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for mediocrity at best.
Yeah. So one thing, we've talked, you and I have talked for tens of hours, perhaps hundreds of hours, right? And I just think about the compounding effect of coaching, right? But again, you have to find the right coach, or else you're not going to be into it. I've referred a bunch of people to you because you're the real deal, but you have to do the work as the one who's paying for the coaching. So you can coach me, but one thing about me is I'll do the work. So you and I will outwork the average bear, because I think we have a hunger, a drive, right? We talked at the beginning of our call about, finding an escape through work. Well, whatever it is, the more I study successful people, the more I see a lot of people that resonates with them. They're just find themselves, they sometimes lose themselves at work, and that can be dangerous at times, right? But ambition is a good thing, but sometimes they can go too far. We need work-life balance. So a lot of times, on one of our calls, you talked about this before. No means not yet. You were just talking a few moments ago about follow-up marketing. I think a lawyer has got to be nervy, has got to have some chutzpah, has got to follow up I mean, I will keep following up because Cindy, and I know no one ever says, Cindy, stop, enough, your body, enough. Like, they don't say it to you. Eventually they may say, we're not interested, and that's fine that they continually say that. But it's like, at some point, if you follow up, you're gonna get the business. And that's where a lot of lawyers just like totally miss the boat. We're very, by most part, intelligent profession, but in many ways a naive profession, because like, there's the fortune is in the follow-up, but that no means not yet was very helpful for me. As I got more into this, I can tell you in the audience, my whole career shifted, my mindset shifted, right? I think the mindset, you and I, a lot of our calls about mindset. Our last couple of calls, I'm peeling back the curtains, to the audience, because I don't really care, because I'm out there, and very transparent. I've been like with you, Cindy, I'm pissed. I'm discouraged. I want more growth, faster growth. And you're always telling me, and I'm starting to tell other lawyers this, they need to be patient, right? You have got to be patient. But I'm a believer, Dan Kennedy said once, who you and I both, have studied. Dan Kennedy said once, he sets ships at sea to see what comes back, but each day sets a couple ships, see what comes back. And I think that's really important. Another thing that has stuck with me from our sessions is golden habits. Because you've talked about that a lot. Could you talk about golden habits, what that to you means for a successful attorney?
It's the gold we're after. And so it's one of those habits that you are going to create, that you're going to fulfill on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I want to interject that people have habits and entities have processes. So in addition to the habits, the habits then are driven by the processes. So as an example, most attorneys who are running their own practice, they have no idea what a key performance indicator is. Yep. They don't know about how many leads did they get in the past week? How many deals did they close? But then also, we need to be looking at our financials, or I frankly looked at mine on almost a daily basis, because I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly how much revenue that I needed on a monthly basis to make the business nut, how much for me. And so what are we doing here? So every Friday, then, for example, I'd have the golden habit of pulling apart. Where did the business come from? Did we send out our thank you notes to people who send business? And that's another point here, is showing gratitude to people. I know that you are big on writing handwritten thank you notes.
Yes.
I can't overemphasize the lack of gratitude that I see from some people. In building the practice, some of the other golden habits then are reviewing your marketing plan. As an example, I'm spending XYZ on a certain initiative. How much money am I making out of it? And it's looking at these on a weekly basis, or however you determine, that will really drive you to higher success.
What I've discovered is the more I share, and just as a quick aside, you just mentioned handwritten notes. This is for people listening; they can't see this, but people watching. This is my handwritten note. It's got my face. It's got language about referrals. So, as an aside, I encourage the attorney listening to take a think week. And I'll explain why. A think week is really important. Bill Gates, John Morgan have talked about think weeks, and I did that. So during my think week this year, January 2024, I said, I'm going to send out 250 thank you cards. I'd always like whimsically send out thank you cards. Thanks, Cindy, for your referral. Thanks, whatever. But when you have things on that's a KPI. I said at the beginning of the year, So the KPIs that I said at the beginning of the year, I'm on track. So I'm on track to exceed for those handwritten notes. And I think, honestly, a lot of lawyers would naively say, how can you measure the ROI in those handwritten notes? Like, do they work? When a lawyer asks me that, they just don't get it, at least not yet, because like that's not about ROI. That's about, like you just said, gratitude, showing up. How many lawyers take the time? I recently just connected 2 lawyers in my network, and one of them didn't even say thank you. Just like I was kind of like, okay, I wasn't offended, but I was kind of perplexed. Like when someone does something for you, and I encourage you to share your stuff, like share what works in your practice. Giver's Gain. It's true. A really good book I want to recommend. And you've probably heard of it or if not read it. The Go Giver.
Yes.
Go Giver, right? And that stuff works because it's legit. Share your stuff. I get up on this podcast, get on stage, bar association, speaking engagement, sharing what works. Because old Chris Earley 5-7 years ago would have that's nuts. You can't share your stuff, man. That's crazy. The more you share, the more you're gonna get. And that's just the way it works. And you're definitely a sharer because your mindset has evolved and is at a higher level, right? And I think that's really important to get there.
I believe in abundance.
100%.
I believe that by sharing, we create a bigger pie for everyone.
Yes.
And when I was in practice, I mean, look, I was a bar association speaker constantly, a conference speaker. Cause I mean, I loved the field, that I loved sharing the information. And I also knew that that's what was going to make me well known. It was part of my brand. And any attorney who ever called me and asked for help in a case or said, can I pick your brain? Can I do this? It was an open door, because I think that as a profession, I owe that to my colleagues.
Yeah.
And that's another objection that I get from some on being a CLE speaker. Well, I don't want to share my secrets with others. Yeah. I'm like, wow, your secrets must be really high level if you're not wanting to share them. I mean, it's for me, share it all. If I am up there in a CLE, and I share a high-level idea in a trust that I've set up, now I've given intellectual capital to someone else, and they can run with it and build bigger ideas, and then we all benefit.
Yep. It's gonna. I mean, you don't do it for this reason, but it's gonna come back to you. It's gonna come back to you probably 100x. Actually, let me ask you this. I am very public. I do a lot of speaking, and I'm blessed, and that took a lot of nerve. That comes back to no, not means not yet, right? So a lot of bar organizations had to ask multiple times, but once you get in the door and you deliver, they want to have you back. So I did that with the Vermont bar yesterday. Spoke with their members 2 months ago. I just did back-to-back sessions this week, right? I don't know if I'd be doing those conversations had we not met, because you really helped me get into that arena. But it takes two. It takes the coach, it takes the coachee, whatever, as we said earlier, to do the work. For the lawyer that says, okay, raising their hand, I get it. I need to get public speaking engagements. How would you suggest going about doing that for the practitioner who just hasn't done it before or wants to do more of it?
Yeah, pick a topic. So let's take an example. In my world, it would be the estate planning, elder law world. Maybe I would say the 10 tips or 10 pitfalls to look out for in drafting an estate plan. And then what I would do is make a course description and have a benefit statement as to what the audience is going to get out of it. I would draft it. I would draft the first presentation for one given audience. Frankly, probably an attorney audience. Then you can redraft it for the public, because then you can get out there and go to Rotary clubs or wherever it is you're going to give speeches to the public using the same information, but just re-articulating it. Okay. Same thing, giving it to accountants, financial planners. Okay, now I got the speech. What's next? Well, I got to have an audience. So the audience they're not, most lawyers say, well, the Bar Association never contacted me about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, to the heck no. It's us who, to me, if it's worth doing, it's worth having an initiative. So we put together a cover letter, beautiful course description with graphics. The long-term plan is to have more than one course. You want to have now the finer points of power of attorney may be the second one. You get my drift. So as an example, in my own business, I've got 13 hours of presentations in the Sharper Lawyer, 9 hours for Legal Burnout Solution. Because it's easier to find a new audience than to create a new speech. Then I do the distribution where I'm sending the proposals out to bar associations, law firms, wherever, maybe an estate and financial planning council if you're in that arena. Where can I get clients? Who are going to be good referral sources? And then nobody will get back to you.
Oh, yeah.
So
Never.
That's when you follow up. And that's when phone call. And you need to keep like an Excel sheet, some kind of spreadsheet, some software program where you know who you've called, who you've talked to. And then you just keep on it until you get picked. Chris, this was in 2007. And by that time, it was like I was probably full of myself and was out there speaking a lot, and I was a national speaker by that point. And I got invited to submit a proposal to speak at $1 Million Roundtable, which is a huge international conference for financial professionals. And so I put my proposal in and I didn't get chosen. I got turned down. I'm like, what? So what I did, I marked my calendar 6 months from then that I would start investigating. So I did my research and thank goodness we had the internet by then. And I was able to find out who was in charge of the estate planning speeches. I gave the guy a call. I said, look, I didn't get picked last year. I don't know why. Can you give me some reasons, some tips? He said, anybody who wants this speech that bad gets it. So you send it your proposal directly to this email, and I will make sure that you get on I have my own breakout sessions. Now, there were 8,500 people there. I only had, in my breakout sessions, 250. But it was a game changer. Now, I was getting referrals from out of state. In state, then what it did is the people that had been at the conference in state, they would come to, I know who you are and all this. Now, all of a sudden, my stock went up in value because I spoke at that conference. But I wouldn't have. My whole point in this long-winded story is I wouldn't have got it unless I went out of my comfort zone. And Chris, I still go out of my comfort zone. And sometimes it could be a matter in a speech I gave a couple weeks ago. The audience was not a type of audience I had spoken to before. And I thought, they're really gonna, and it was a pretty high level audience. I was like, oh man, and it's a speech I've given. I'm not 100 times, but a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we got to revamp it. I said, Cindy, you're good enough. Okay. What you have is good enough or you wouldn't have been chosen. So just do your thing. And it was a home run. But I still had to give some self-talk. And that is another key, is that it is the self-talk. I just had this week where I had an interview with a potential new client a week ago. She said, and I'm like, well, how long is it going to take you to make your decision? That's another thing. You need to learn how to do some sales. Sales training will help anyone. So I was like, well, how long does it take you to make your decision? And she said, I will have made the decision over the weekend, so I'll let you know Monday. I didn't hear from her on Monday. I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't hear from her on Tuesday. See, I had my calendar marked. On Wednesday, I reached out. Haven't heard from you yet. Wanted to see where you are in the process. You need any more information? I got a note of apology back from her. I am so sorry. Well, now she's a client. She signed up, done. But if you let the drift happen, then you might lose the client. And it happens no matter what kind of professional you are.
Drift is a good word. You have to stay. You have to stay aggressive, and I mean, tactfully. But one thing I just want to mention, and we talked about public speaking. That's just one form of marketing, right? I'm a big believer that you can repurpose. This is what it was a game changer for me. For the audiences, repurposing marketing assets. That I since our work together, I created. I think I'm at 9 or 10 canned presentations that I could deliver in my sleep. And I only do this stuff because I actually like it. Like I posted to social media that yesterday I posted, I actually like to teach lawyers. And like, I'm nothing special. Like I didn't go to an Ivy League law school here, but you'd be surprised. The universe will open to opportunities for those who seek them out, will pursue them, and will have the nerve, the chutzpah to do the presentation, right? Because most lawyers won't do it. And that spins off of other opportunities. So like, Massachusetts Bar, Boston Bar, once I got my foot in the door, I was reinvited back, I'm fortunate to say, right? So you just got to and this doesn't apply to just speaking, just all facets, right? Being nervy, going forward. Any successful person put themselves, you just described it, uncomfortable positions. When you're uncomfortable, that's where a lot of people hit the brakes, they ease up. That's where you have to hit the gas even harder, lean into that uncomfortableness. I have only been able to scale the law firm from being completely uncomfortable, breaking barriers of comfort, right? In each age, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome that everyone can relate to. It's like, oh, you're looking around. I don't know if that's almost a good sign, imposter syndrome, because you're like, geez, this is foreign territory. I don't know if I belong here. Then you penetrate that level. Oh, this is another foreign territory. And you keep, busting through that. Pivoting slightly here, I'd love to hear your take as we wrap up. I'd love to hear your take on how the business of law has changed since you started in '84 your practice. It just seems like the business of law has gained more and more traction in this industry. How have you seen it evolve from where it was, say, 40 years ago?
Now you're not looked down upon if you're running your practice as a business. Back in the day, it was almost like that you're tacky.
Yeah.
Even still,
Cindy, even still a little bit.
People still do.
Yeah.
And my mother had this saying. She'd say, well, you laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
And that was my attitude, is that if other people don't want to build their practice, that's fine. But I'm going to be the one that has the clients because I'm the one that's doing the marketing. So where I've seen it change is that it's perception as to that marketing's okay. You think about it. It was the Bates v. Arizona case, the attorney marketing. It's 1977. In fact, Chris, I had an idea when I was doing bankruptcy work, is that I said, wow, the people that need to file bankruptcy, Chapter 13s, are people that are in foreclosure or whose car got repossessed. So I hired people to go up to the courthouse, go through the records, and I was getting lists of foreclosures, lists of repos. And then we were sending out mass mailings to, hey, your car just got repossessed and all this. Well, I got a call from a letter from the U.S. trustee, cease and desist. This is unethical behavior. I'm like, oh man. So I looked at the ABA, looked at their attorney advertising committee, and I wrote them a letter. And I said, hey, do you have any ideas? They said, sit tight, because there was a Supreme Court decision, and it was Shapiro versus the Board of Bar Examiners of Kentucky. It was the same issue. Direct mail hadn't been allowed.
Mm-hmm.
By coincidence, I was sitting in the United States Supreme Court in the audience when that decision was rendered in my favor. And of course, I went right back to the office and got pumped up again in getting the marketing out. The other ways it's changed is that the technology. Look, the technology has made it so that you can be a one-man show, that people can practice law off of an iPhone. And so the efficiencies are much different. But let me just bring out that I do recommend, as you well know, that in scaling up it some way, that hiring people so that you can rise to your greatest level of ability. I want everybody out there to just be doing those tasks that you are really, really good at and that you love. Because if it doesn't fit those two criteria, you can pay someone else to do it. And I urge that you do. And then you'll build.
Yeah, I think that's smart. That's definitely, I hope everyone just wrote that down. That's, I know you're a big Dan Sullivan student. And so, the highest, best use of your time isn't going to the post office, fixing the copier. It's about a few things each day. For me, it's like, how do I move this company forward, right? What's the next step? But I think what you just said is spot on. There's no question. Let me ask you a question. I'm just curious. In your estimation, should every attorney have a coach? Like, what attorneys do you feel should, in fact, have a coach?
I think that most attorneys could benefit from having a coach. And because what a coach will do is, first of all, many people don't have clarity as to what their goals really are. Or they've set goals that they really don't want, that they've adopted somebody else's goals. So that's number one, to have you help with clarity as to where you want to be. And then what I tell people is, tell me where you want to go, and I'm going to help you with the steps to get there. Because what the issue is, we can't really see, our own self in the way that a trained, objective professional can. And I know myself, having been through, it's really so much fun because I see the pain points. I see where people are. And then we can begin working on mindset, can get people to a better place. And I had coaches for years. Years.
Do you still have a coach or no?
I don't right now.
Okay.
I'm at the point, I'm quite satisfied with where I am. And, but that being said, I'm a lifelong learner. It's probably been about 3 years since I had a coach, and I read constantly. Absolutely. Almost every single morning, I have about 20 minutes that I'm reading either something spiritual or business, usually both. And then in the afternoon, when we finish here today, I've got an hour where I'm just going to read whatever I want. Everybody gets their information. So a lot of people, podcasts. I learn best myself. Reading is where I retain the most.
Yeah. I think you read my mind. I was going to ask you, I ask every guest this at the end of the episode. What book has had the most profound impact on you and your life?
Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn. and The Worry Cure by Dr. Leahy, Leahy. Neither of them are new books, but what they've done is they just shifted my mindset so that, imagine if you could go through your whole day and not be paralyzed by worry at any point in your day ever. And that's what the Worry Cure really helps, is getting a awareness of who you really are and what you don't need to be spending your time unproductively doing. Those are my two favorite books.
I think the audience members' ears just perked up when you said, these can help you stop worrying, because as a profession, we're a very worrisome lot, right? We're trained to be worriers, paranoia, but see, that dovetails into unhealthy things frequently. So I think it's really important, mental health, you are, definitely on the forefront of educating lawyers about, that space, the need to have your own space, to just healthy mindset, right? Not just business mindset, but just a healthy, just mental health. Because in this field, there's a lot of sad afflictions. There's heavy anxiety, heavy depression. There's disproportionate rates of suicide. So a lot of people on this podcast recommend business books, but that's what you just suggested is arguably much more important, right? It's the self-talk. I would encourage the practitioner, be careful with your self-talk, like you just talked about. That self-talk is everything. For me, we've talked about this. My whole approach, my life, my career, my marriage, being a father has gotten better since I started meditating. Because I brought into when I got my bar card, it was already a big worry or catastrophe. And then a bar card can even accentuate that, because you're so freaking paranoid about screwing up. And so I think those book suggestions are spot on. I think that's really important.
Look, the healthier you are, the clearer your mind. And that includes physical health as well. I've always been one working out almost every day. Yeah. It's like one of my mentors taught me, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if I've got clarity of thought at all times, my work is going to be more clear. And Chris, I do want to make a comment about, I'm not promoting work, like you have to work long hours in order to make lots of money, because my philosophy is that you can do anything as long as you hire someone else to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that as well.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate it, Cindy. How can people get in touch with you?
You can email me at cindy@thesharperlawyer.com or text me at 609-923-1017. And if you didn't write that down, just look at my website, thesharperlawyer.com, and you'll find me.
I love it. Cindy, fantastic. You hit it out of the park. Appreciate you coming on. I knew we'd have a good conversation. And this is nice because you're a coach of mine. I thought it was nice to bring you on and have a nice conversation about, what I'm doing, how you're helping me, how you're helping others. I think most lawyers should have a coach, and I see the profession picking that idea up more and more. So if you don't already have a coach, I encourage you, look into it. It can really move the needle. So I appreciate you, Cindy. Thank you for all you've done for my practice and my life.
Thank you. You're a wonderful client, but that's because you believe in yourself and you do the work.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate it so much. All right, that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel.